Hey team, welcome to another Bullpen Bulletin with Coach Hart and Building Better Baseball. Today we are getting into some tips on how to best coach first base. Sometimes first base gets kind of like overlooked, and I want to just give you some tips on how to be the best first base coach. Remember, I'm Coach Hart. This is Building Better Baseball, the best place for baseball education. So let's get into the tips on how to coach first base. So first, some things to think about. Being a first base coach is just as important as being a third base coach. So there's a reason that there are two base coaches, right? Obviously, some people think that third base is more important because they're the ones that give the signs and they're the ones that decide when to send runners to score runs. But the first base coach, don't overlook it. It is just as important as a job as third base is. So, being one of the most underrated skills in baseball, many youth players struggle with base running. And base running is a very, very difficult thing to kind of master. There's a lot of little nuances where some kids struggle with. The first base coach, you are there to help them get around to the home plate and get around the base paths, right? You are the first step on getting that run for your team. So don't overlook the coaching first base because, like I said, base running is a hard skill for some kids to understand, and you are there to help them with their base running. So you're their eyes in the field after they hit the ball. So when they hit the ball, they are just running. They're supposed to be running, and all they're focusing on is you. So you are there to tell them where to go, what to do, where the ball is, who's going to throw it where, and everything. So be aware of that. You are their first eyes in the field after they hit the ball. So let's get into it. So your in-game responsibilities. Number one, telling players who hit the ball how to approach first base. So do they run through and break down? So is it a ground ball into the infield and they just have to try and beat it out and run as fast as they can? Or do they take a turn? Did somebody bobble it in the infield where they can take a turn? Or did it go into the shallow outfield where they can take a turn and try and take advantage and advance to second base? Or do they round and go to second? So they may not know how far they hit it or that it got past an outfielder, right? So you're their first pair of eyes to let them know what to do at first base, how to interact with first base. They need to know this information quickly, and you are the person to give that to them. So your first responsibility is after they hit the ball, you have to, tell them how to interact with first base based on these three things. Number two, know your players' running speeds. So this gets into know who will be able to advance to second on an overthrow or they'll be able to leg out a double, right? So if there's like a kind of a deeper ball into the outfield, if you know your player's running speeds and you have a good grasp on who can beat it out, you can send that player who's a little quicker, and you may want to hold a player who's a little slower and you know that they won't be able to get to second base. Same thing with an overthrow from the infield that gets past the first baseman. If there's a fast runner, you know immediately to send them. And also, if there's a slower runner, you know you should probably keep them at first base. And this kind of plays into also knowing what kind of backstop or fence is at first base. Is an overthrow just going to hit a fence and it's really short? Or is there a lot of space there where you can send some different runners, right? So knowing your players' running speeds is huge for both coaches, but especially for first base, because if you want to take advantage of that overthrow and send them a second, make sure that they have a little bit faster running speed. And knowing your players' running speeds will play into that. So number three, observe outfield arms during pregame warmups. So during your pregame, while you're watching the other team, just check out the outfielder's arms. Do they have strong arms, weak arms? Do they make good throws? Do they hit their cutoff man? How disciplined are they with their throws? And this works with knowing the running speed for your players. So if you have a kind of a slower runner, but during your pregame warmups, you saw that the left fielder has no arm and they never hit their cutoff man, you could try and think about sending that runner, even though that they're a little slower. You know that the left fielder, his talent level and what his discipline is in his throws, you could probably send that player. But at the same time, if you have a little bit of a fast runner where you normally send them, but during pregame warmups, you saw that the center fielder has a cannon, he always hits his cutoff man, and you know that that throw is going to beat your runner, maybe you should hold that runner, right? So knowing the outfielder's arms and the strength of their arms and the discipline of their throws will play a lot into your decision on whether to send a player or not send a player. So number 4, remind runners of situation every pitch. Every pitch. Repeat the number of outs. Youth players always forget how many outs there are. It's just something that happens, right? They're always thinking about all these sorts of different things and they always forget the situation. So please repeat the number of outs every single time they come back to the base, every pitch. And you want to remind them who's on base in front of them. If there's a man on second, make sure that you don't run past them, or make sure you realize that they're there. And if they don't go, you can't go. You know what I mean? On like a tag up or something. Is there a man on third where there's nobody on second, where there's a free base in front of them? So knowing who's in front of them will play a lot into their decision on whether to run or not. Also, look at third base coach for signs. Every single pitch, whenever the first base runner comes back to the base, remind them to look at the third base coach for their signs, because that is going to tell them what to do for the next pitch, right? Your third base coach has an idea of what he wants to happen, and the first base runner, if they miss some signs, that kind of throws off what the third base coach's plan is. So it's your job to let them know, to let the runners know, to look at the third base coach every single time to get their signs. Right? And one thing I don't say in this video is you should also know your own signs. So if the third base coach wants the player to steal, you should know that they are supposed to steal. If there's going to be a bunt happening, you should know that there's going to be a bunt happening. You'd be surprised on how many coaches don't actually know their own signs. So make sure you know your signs for your players. So number 5. Point out outfield positioning, all right? So when your player gets back and you remind them of the situation, they've gotten their signs, just give them a little heads up. Hey, the center fielder is playing a little deep. So if there's a hit in shallow center field, you can beat that out, all right? Or they're playing a little shallow. The outfielders are playing in, so make sure you get to that second base as quickly as you can. Right? So just point out the outfield positioning, and playing into the arms and the things you saw in pregame warmups, you could remind them, hey, if there is a deep fly ball to center field, right? The center fielder I saw didn't have a good arm and he never hit his cutoff man. So maybe that's an opportunity for you to tag up on that play. Maybe the right fielder is playing deep and they can go first to third on a right side ground ball, right? Just different things like that you can point out where you can take the most advantage of the base running and of the outfield's positioning. And that's kind of what I say here. Are they playing deep or shallow? Let them know who has a weaker arm and that they could take advantage of. Number 6, and this is kind of for older players who can lead off and pitchers can pick off and everything. Look for cues for pitchers' pickoff moves. You're the second pair of eyes for your players, and let them know what you see. So if you see the pitcher give a tell of when they're going to pick off, then you can let your runner know, right? Whenever you see the pitcher come to a set and he's turned his body, he knows he's going to pick off. Or for a lefty, whenever they lift their leg and they're looking home, they're automatically coming here. And whenever they lift their leg and they're looking at you, they're automatically going home, right? That's a common tell of lefties that they're going to pick off or not pick off, right? So just let them know what you see so they can kind of think and they can kind of prepare for a pickoff or prepare for a steal if they're supposed to steal. So these are just kind of 6 tips to coach first base effectively. And like I said in the beginning, first base coach, they're kind of overlooked and it's almost looked at as like not really important and like, what do I do? These are 6 things that you can do to really improve your base running and really improve the runner's decision making on the base paths, right? And sometimes, especially in youth baseball, these players, they don't think about all of the outfield positioning and all of the things that you could see and that you could help them out with, right? And even as little as looking at the third base coach for signs. There are many youth players who just forget to do that. They get back on first and they're just ready for the next pitch. So please remind them of the situation. Remind them to look for their signs. Remind them to look at the outfield positioning and look at who has a strong arm and what you saw in pregame warmups. All of these things, they really help your youth players have quality base running because, like I said, that's an underrated skill that many youth players struggle with is quality base running. So, hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to grab your free guide link below down in the description. I got a bunch of them down there. I made them for you for free. Grab one, grab all, grab whatever you think would be helpful for you. So, I'm Coach Hart. This is Building Better Baseball, and I will see you in another video real soon.